What's good, everybody? Welcome to another exciting episode of Full Circle. I'm your host, as always, Harmon Jr. Please feel free to find me at Harmon Jr. on all your favorite social media websites. That's my name. I don't change it. Branding people. Also, just a fun fact. Yes, I'm aware that there's an Odell Beckham Jr. I had 3 people tell me that as they tried to find me. I'm like, I guess you don't watch football, but yes, there's another Odell out there in the world, and he is a tad bit more famous than me. Thank you for enlightening me on that. But as always, we have a great show this week, and we have a very special guest. You've seen her. You love her. She is one of gaming's rising stars, up for some Game Her Awards, I believe. It is the wonderful Janet Garcia. Woo, how are you doing today, ma'am?
Yo, what's up? I'm pretty good. Also have, branding that cuts across the board at awesomeness. It's really nice to have something everywhere. Like, it's so hard to pin that down on the internet. So, yeah, if you've been able to do that, props to you.
Thank you. And Janet, I gave you a small intro, but just in case there's some fools hiding under a rock, who are you and what do you do?
I am a game critic and content creator, independent game creator and content creator. I write previews and reviews for my own outlet, Pentapixels. I have my own Patreon, patreon.com/gameonasis. I have a weekly news podcast called Gameonasis Weekly of quick hits, like about 30 minutes or less on the biggest stories. And when I'm not doing all that stuff on my own, as well as like Twitch streaming, I am the co-host of Kind of Funny's PS I Love You, which is the PlayStation podcast over at Kind of Funny. And I'm also a Min-Max cohort, so you'll see me on their Pillar podcast, the Min-Max Show. You'll also catch me occasionally on their streams as well. And I think that's everything I do. It's a little bit of a lot.
Can I real quick say INDEPENDENT, what you know about me? Basically.
Yeah, that's absolutely on my freelance playlist. Yes. 100%.
Well, thank you for joining me. And people, I know these past couple of weeks, we've been dealing with harsh and crazy topics. Not the whole show, but we have. So this week, I was like, you know what? Janet has spicy hot takes all the damn time, but that's okay. We're gonna actually have an easygoing show today, which I don't know, it could get crazy because those are the ones they usually do. This week, we're going to be talking about Nickelodeon All-Stars because we have yet to talk about it on the show, but they've been releasing character movesets, all these developer videos, and they're really trying to be the next Melee. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. Before that, we're going to be celebrating Undertale. They recently had their 6-year anniversary. We finally got Deltarune Chapter 2 after me yelling about it on Twitter for months about where is it. It's finally here. It's not on PlayStation, so I'm not carrying over my save. C'est la vie. I'll move on. But before that, we're going to be talking about Nintendo. And I know Janet knows a lot about Nintendo. She was on a Nintendo podcast for a good while, and it's about the Switch because, as we know, Nintendo was like, that bastard father that we all love, that we praise for doing things that he's supposed to do. He watched his kids this weekend. What a great father. He paid child support once a year. What a great father. That is Nintendo to us because we love them and we parade them around for doing things they're supposed to do, like adding Bluetooth headsets to the Switch. And here's the fun fact. It's been there all along. And now, Janet, I just gotta ask you, what do you think is our weird stepfather, absentee father, bad father relationship with Nintendo? Why can they do no wrong?
I love that comparison. I don't think I've heard anyone make that before. For me, I forget which one I always fall back on, but it's just like, I think that really sums it up because it really is that situation where sure, it's laughable, like it's ridiculous, it's the bare minimum, and the things we ask for as Nintendo fans are things that like the other big two have had for like eons. Like the conversations that surround like PlayStation versus Xbox are very like, okay, well, who has like the most exclusives, or what kind of services do you have? And it's like kind of higher level intricacies. Meanwhile, there's like Nintendo where it's like we haven't had AAA support for like 4 generations, and like everything's always a little bit weird, and like but the first party games are really good, but like everything else is awful. Like, oh, don't play it. The free games, they're trash. Like, oh, this game's available, but now we took it off of it being available because when they did that thing with the All-Stars collection where it was like it's around but for a limited time, I'm like, y'all hitting me with a limited run, like Nintendo, which is like a powerhouse. But it is frustrating in many ways being a Nintendo fan, but I think we've all kind of accepted that this is our lot in life, and we hunger for more all the time. Even if it's like the morsels that they just kind of throw at you, you're like, ah, yes, thank God, some freaking water in this desert. So I was really excited and surprised to see the Bluetooth headset thing. It is weird 'cause it's like, why wasn't this done sooner? Not to imply that it didn't take them work to do, because I never want to discount that, but it just feels odd, like so late into the life cycle of the console for this to even drop. Like, I can understand maybe they had issues at like launch with like getting it to work or something, but it's just odd, and it's very unceremonious, which is how Nintendo does a lot of their stuff. But hey, my AirPods can link up now, and that's good enough for me. It doesn't have mic support also with the again, weird Nintendo stuff where it's like, even when you get a win, it's like there's some asterisks attached, but you know, I'll take what I can get.
So yeah, it does have mic support because they're still big on the whole you can't talk online. We're protecting the kiddos, I guess, is their weird stance that they keep taking. But I'm like, are you though? Whatever. But I will say this, for the first time in history, I do agree with no mic support because I've really gotten to Pokemon Unite, and I kid you not, the amount of kids that I would have cussed out by now is unreal. It is, I kid you not. I always tell people, I don't get mad playing Apex. I never got mad playing Halo 2 back in the day. I don't get mad playing whatever online multiplayer game has COD. I'm not really raging. But you give me a Nintendo game, Mario Kart is like, I lose all sense of religion. I generally don't curse. That goes out the window. So I don't know what it is about Nintendo games specifically that just enrage me. But yes. But my friend is already, he shall not be named, he is working right now as I speak to mod his system to where the microphone functionality will work. I hope he gets that working. I will use it. I will share it to the mod community in case it hasn't already been done. And we are going to have a good time before Nintendo, I don't know, blows up our Switch or something like that. And,
yeah, basically.
And you know, to your credit, what you're saying, so I don't think anyone's talked about this, but it's about, you know, features of the Switch. Everyone says the DualSense is amazing. And it works. And if you haven't played the PlayStation 5, get a chance to. If you love Control, play the PS5 version because the DualSense controls on that are amazing. But the Switch actually made a DualSense with HD Rumble. They showcased it when it first came out and then proceeded to never use it again for some strange reason. I don't know why.
Yeah, I mean, I think it has. I mean, even the DualSense, like, and I really have enjoyed the use of the DualSense on the whole. I do think some integrations are better than others. Like, in Returnal, like feeling like the raindrops and stuff, like, oh, that's cool, but also like it's not that needed, but it can be kind of fun. And I think it can be most interesting when it's like kind of adding to the feel of like shooting, like the sort of adaptive triggers when you're like with the different weights and stuff. Like, I think that is meaningful. And I guess I feel like that's one reason that for the Switch it didn't really like end up working in the same way, besides the fact that like Switch's ethos is, or Nintendo's ethos has always been about like the software more than the hardware. And I do feel like ultimately HD Rumble is kind of more in that hardware side of things. But I think the other, like, there's a couple issues. One, they don't have, their like triggers don't have give like that. Like, that's why, you know, it took so long for Sunshine to show up on Switch. And even when we did, people were like, how are they going to make it work? Because it doesn't have the same give that the GameCube controller had. So that being a really big perk of the DualSense, like, that's not even possible on the Switch's hardware. And then I think the other reason that we don't see more intriguing integrations is because there's so many ways to play, and the challenge there is like you have to make something that works regardless of the way that you're playing it for the most part. And by that I mean like whether you're in handheld, whether you have a Pro controller, whether you have split Joy-Con, like it all has to be kind of the same experience. And I wonder if that element makes it so that, you know, they can't really use the HD Rumble in a more intriguing way. I think the most interesting thing we've seen is maybe like, you know, with Mario Odyssey, where it's like, oh, where's the moon? And it kind of vibrates, but it hasn't really been used for immersion. But I would also argue that like Nintendo doesn't really do immersion in the graphical kind of spectacle sense of things. And I feel like that's kind of what the DualSense is for. So I guess in a way it doesn't really, I think, fit in for what Nintendo does. I think Nintendo has used it in a very Nintendo way, which is like, how many ice cubes are in the glass? Or like, where's the moon? You know, it's very like playful and kind of cutesy. And I think that makes sense for what their brand is versus PlayStation. It's like, you know, now the gun like has different versions if you weigh it down differently.
Oh man, I like how you said Nintendo has made incredible technology and they use it for the most mundane cutesy things, like ice cubes in the glass. Which, I mean, it's not wrong. It's interesting to think that the Switch is this weird technical powerhouse, because I remember when the Switch first came out and people were dissecting the pattern, like apparently it has the ability to make projections like on the wall, or like, project things in your hand, and we've seen these other things. And Janet, I just really gotta know, why do you think Nintendo is hiding all the things this system can do? It's like they made a super system and then shackled it and was like, nah, the world's not ready. The world's just not ready.
I think it's more a playful, like I probably wouldn't call it a super system, because I think it's weird, right? Because like you mentioned, it's sort of in a way a technical marvel, like the ability to. I remember first getting the Switch, and I've had mine since day one. I don't know how long have you had your Switch? Were you a day one person? Day one. Hell, right? See, we were there. We were putting the straps on incorrectly and all that stuff. Like that was the vibe. You jump off the Great Plateau. Like it was an evening, right? Like I remember picking mine up at the GameStop. Yes, exactly. Just frantically looking up YouTube Australia, how to remove Joy-Con strap from inverted Joy-Con, Anyway, but I remember, the sell of what the Switch is being both a docked console and a handheld, and it's supposed to be instant, and they have their little snap and all that. But the first time I actually did it, and it really was pretty much instantaneous, I was like, whoa, this is wild. Like, they said they'd do it, and they really did. So I do want to give, Nintendo their flowers on that front. But to kind of bring it back to a point I made earlier, I think their use of technology is always for how do we, make something wonky and playful and weird. And I think stuff like Mario Kart Live Home Circuit is that. I think Nintendo constantly is making nods to their roots as a toy company with the decisions that they make, and you're not really going to see stuff like that as much for maybe mainline Mario. And then again, when you think of third-party support, there really isn't any, so you won't really see like, okay, this on Switch, it's going to have like this weird technical angle, because it would be just so specific for that platform and wouldn't really make as much sense because of the kind of ways they use their integrations. So yeah, it's really relegated more to these like one-off oddities that the Switch offers. And then the light kind of throws a wrench in everything too, because again, you have to be able to like cater to these different markets. So I think that's one reason we don't see that stuff used more.
That's good. All right, Janet. So I have moments sometimes where I say you got to put on your tinfoil hat, because this isn't going to be our journalistic ability. This isn't going to be insider knowledge. This is pure speculation from the gut. So I'm going to put on my metaphorical hat. I tried to make one and then it started messing up my hair, so I said scratch that. Never doing that again. But so let's just pretend the Super Nintendo Switch 2, whatever is going to happen. Nintendo is being honest. It's never happening. They had no intention of making it. The OLED is it. Let's just say I refuse to believe that, but assuming that is completely it, is the next iteration of console, do you think, not even going to be a Switch? Nintendo's going to be like, here's the Nintendo Flubber Magobber, and this is it. You think Nintendo will just surprise us like that? Because I feel like that's where it has to go. If no Super Nintendo Switch is literally not going to be made, it has to be some new fancy thing that, for the love of God, please, is backwards compatible, because I would like lose my ever loving mind if it wasn't.
I mean, do you think to that point, if they don't do, just like a Switch, the Fable Switch Pro, are you thinking the next thing would just, I think the big question people ask, and I'm wondering what your opinion is on it, is would Nintendo's next console be another hybrid console, or would it be a home console only and they go back to having handhelds independently as a line?
Only because it's Nintendo, I bet it wouldn't even be a hybrid console. Like, I think that would be the kicker. It would be something compatible with the Switch in some way. I don't know how, as in do Switch games either work on it. Think of it of like the original DS, where it had a slot for DS games and then a slot for, Game Boy Advance and Game Boy games. My guess it would be something like that. Here's a new thing, 4K, 1080p, maybe 60 frames. Who knows? It's not going to be a PS5 or Series X, obviously. And then, it'll be like, here's where you put the disc or whatever, knowing Nintendo. And then here's a slot where you put your Switch games in. And there you go. That's what I feel like would be and would make the most sense. It would make sense and also not make sense, because you think they're all in on the Switch at this point.
Yeah, it's difficult because looking back at their history, there are times where there's like at least iteration, at least in the name, the branding, right? You mentioned like the Super Nintendo Switch, like there's, the NES and the SNES, though obviously those offered like very different things and had sort of different angles to them. And even then they were iterating, right? Like my first console was like the SNES Junior, which was like one of the last SKUs of the SNES to be released. It came out like I think 1 or 2 years into the N64's life cycle. Um, I don't know what they would do. I do feel like the Switch is great. People love it. So I feel like they would just do another hybrid console. I think the idea of backwards compatibility is really appealing, and I do think it's something that a lot of gamers want, even if statistically they don't use it that much. Like it's just nice to have. But I don't know. It gets really complex with the hardware because even with like, I remember playing some Wii games on my Wii U and it having to be like you need the nunchucks separate, and I didn't have a Wii, so then I had to like go and like buy. Like I think it just get messy with like some of the hardware integrations, which I think is one reason we don't see a lot of like porting, or like porting gets weird, like when they did the what was it, Skyward Sword, where it's like, okay, well, how do you make it? Well, we still have motion controls, but like the thing is different, and it's just kind of this whole thing. So yeah, I'm really curious as to what they see the future being. I do have concerns at just how like massive the gap technologically is starting to become with like PlayStation 5 and Series X. Not that I expect Nintendo to make something that powerful, but it just feels like, I don't know. In some ways, I do still like, I like the wonkiness of Nintendo, but I do still have the dream of what if I could play Mario and Control on the same console? You know what I mean? Like what if I could live in a world where I could have like the third party games and have that be my go-to? I mean, I think that'd be like so powerful of a thing, but I mean, I don't necessarily think that's ever going to happen, but I can dream.
Yeah. Again, back to my father analogy. We're like, if Nintendo went from like, bastard father to just like generic, I take you to school and I show up to your plays, it would just instantly win like all console debates. Like you said, if we just had a Switch or Nintendo console that was like, look, we're 1080p, we're not gonna be, breaking your eyeballs, but you can play Control, the latest Call of Duty, any basic, you can play Far Cry 6 on it and it runs fine, and like
the Nintendo Steam Deck, you know what I mean? Like if the Steam Deck pans out, I don't know. I mean, it previewed pretty well. Like IGN did a lot of coverage on it for their IGN First, and they seemed really positive on it. But like, I'm still kind of waiting for like what that general consensus looks like and how well that pitch is going to actually work in practice.
Yeah, speaking of the Steam Deck, because obviously people are gonna be like, is this a Switch killer? The short answer is no. Nintendo has proved nothing can kill them. They're not insultingly, but they're the cockroach in the nuclear apocalypse. They're not going anywhere. And I'm curious about the Steam Deck because apparently, since it's a PC, but you're not gonna be able to, upgrade it like a PC. People are concerned about that. I'm not gonna lie, I'm not the biggest PC gamer. But my thing about the Steam Deck is it's clearly, aimed at people who like the PC game. And I'm like, do PC gamers even want a handheld system? Because, I feel like being a PC gamer is like, this is what I do. This is my, area. But I don't know. We'll see. I'm curious. It'll be a case study. Let me put it like this. When Google Stadia was announced, I told everyone, this is going to flop. This is going to fail. Not because I didn't want it to succeed, because we weren't there yet. The Steam Deck, I'm like, we're there yet. I just don't know. We'll have to wait and see on this one.
Yeah.
But speaking about wait and seeing, we finally got to wait and see. Deltarune 2 was here. Man, that was a bad segue. I'm usually better than that. But anyway, Toby Fox and Undertale. Shout out to Toby Fox because, all right, we all know it takes, 5, 6, 10 years to make a game. A team of countless people, and this guy did it by himself. So kudos to all you, people who do it in your garage, quote unquote, because I don't see how. God bless y'all. Y'all need all the monies and accolades. But you played Undertale. Did you play Undertale when it first came out, or was you one of the people who got on it after, everyone said it was the best thing ever?
Yeah, I got on it way after, and I actually played Undertale specifically to play Deltarune because Deltarune was the chapter 1 was the first guide, full guide I've ever written, where it wasn't just here's how to do the Splatfest. Before that I had just done one-off pages for outlets, but that was sort of my test guide when I first got started with IGN freelance. So one of the pages I was assigned to do for that was references to Undertale in Deltarune. And I'm like, well, I can't do that until I play Undertale. So I played Undertale. I technically didn't roll credits on it because I was trying to do a pacifist run as my first one. And I was reading through a guide to like kind of also, I'm like, okay, I can learn about like this guide structure and how like IGN does their guides and stuff. And I was doing a pacifist run and I didn't buy like the spider cookie. I didn't think it was that important. They were just like, buy it. I didn't have that much money at the time. And I'm like, okay. And it wasn't like emphasized, like you need this to do the run. You will not be able to do the run if you don't. So I got to the boss where you're supposed to like, if you have the cookie, you give them the cookie and then you don't have to fight them. But if you don't have the cookie, you have to fight them. And if you've been doing like the way the game kind of changes based on your play, basically it's like the most bullet hell area ever. And I'm like, I can't do it. And I was like playing it all in one day. It was like it was a lot. So I just YouTubed the ending. The TLDR is I did play Undertale. I played after the fact. I actually wasn't a very big fan, but I did like Deltarune, which is weird.
You know, I'm glad you said it because so I played Undertale, so I'm weird with indies. I feel like I never get on them on the ground floor. The only one being was Bastion. That's the only indie that I seamlessly played before it was cool. And I was like, oh God, everyone play this. But that was also in an era where people didn't play indies like almost period. But anyway, I digress. And so people are like, Undertale, best thing since sliced bread. And I'm like, I've seen it. It looks eh. I'm playing like cool games at times. So when I finally did play it, I did the pacifist run. You know, I actually thought it was cool. You know, I was like, oh, this is great. You know, the story's cool. You know, I'm the guy that likes symbolic things where, you know, like, you know, oh, I saw someone get gunned down. I'm like, but I'm like, oh, deep artistic meaning. That's me. And so I enjoyed it, the flower and stuff. So then I was like, all right, let me do the, because apparently more people do the genocide run than the pacifist run. You know, so I'm like, okay. And I was like, okay, no, I hate this game. This game is stupid. How does anyone do the genocide run? This is the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. And that's when I was like, okay. And that's when you see Sans is evil. And, you know, I never even made it to Sans. I couldn't even get that far in the game. And then I was like, I don't understand why I suck. And so
it's like stupid hard. Yeah. It's like weird. No one talks about how hard that game is. Like I find it really, really, and I think that's the thing I didn't like about Undertale, like specifically, like just I wasn't into the gameplay. Like it's also just, and I get like artistic choices or whatever, but it's so like black and white and bland looking that I'm just like, I'm sorry. Like the moving this little heart around, these little like bullet hell sequences, it just wasn't appealing to me. That's probably my biggest gripe of the game, and then it does get really crazy too with how it functions. Yeah,
and I don't know how or why those people's preferred way to play or like because I don't know if this is true. Supposedly the canonical ending is the genocide route somehow, and I'm like, and looking at Deltarune, I'm like, maybe that's true. I'm not sure how, you know, this is all gonna connect, but I say all that to say about is I've always found it weird how much people love Undertale that have never actually played the game. It's one of those games that, like, if you go to like the deviant art and like cultures, like the story has transcended the game almost. And I always find it interesting when games do that somehow. Because I don't know how you feel, like as someone who loves games clearly and play them, I'm always perplexed how people can love a game they never played.
Yeah, I don't know. It's kind of like that different era of a lot of folks just YouTube. Like, well, like kind of how like I finished playing Undertale, I just watched the rest of it on YouTube. I'm like, let's see how this ends because I'm not going to do it. A lot of people do that for like games, which, you know, it's weird in the sense that like we didn't have that option as kids. Like you wouldn't be able to, because YouTube either wasn't a thing or was barely like starting, depending on what your age is. Like there wasn't a culture of like let's plays and all these other like facets of the internet where you could kind of consume something without having played it. So like, yeah, I mean, I guess it's just like a new way that people like to consume like stuff. Personally, I'm not that interested in like consuming games in that way. Not that I'm like above it or anything though. Like I'll rather watch a let's play than not experience something at all. I think that can be beneficial. But yeah, it's like one of those things where I guess in a way, it's like you can be a Pokemon fan and not have liked one of those facets of it. Like I never got really into like the card game of it, but like I liked the video games, and some people only like the cartoons. Obviously, Undertale doesn't have the same like multifaceted like media verticals, but it's kind of like the internet has become its own version of that thing. Like, oh, I just watch like the Let's Plays, or I just read the fan theories, or I just like the art or something.
You make a good point, but I am curious though, because I'm actually so far, I'm opposite of you. I think Deltarune looks and plays better, definitely 100%. But so far, and I know it's only chapter 1, and no people, as of recording, I have not played through all of chapter 2, so maybe my opinion will change. But I have preferred Undertale so far, so I'm curious to see, why do you like Deltarune better?
Yeah, I just like the gameplay better. And like, I think the thing is, with like the story aspect of Undertale, and again, I didn't really like do my full pure play, and also kind of played it with a guide where it was like kind of, you know, I didn't have those moments of like discovery that I think some of the more like original players might have had. But I'm also just with the story stuff, like I'm not a big fan of stories where, oh, but if you play it this way and then this way, and then you get one playthrough from me, and that's it. Like, that's all you're gonna get, and that's all you're guaranteed. Like, if I have to look at it 8 ways to realize why it's beautiful, I feel like that's just not something I'm particularly interested in. And I feel like you need to be able to stay on your own in a singular playthrough. And personally, I don't feel that way about Undertale. Obviously, I'm in the minority there. Everyone loves it. I don't really get why, but like, go off and like live your life. But yeah, so for me, like, okay, Deltarune, the you know, the gameplay is more interesting to me, sort of like the kind of turn-based mixed with bullet hell. And I think the writing is still good. Like, I do think the writing in Undertale has charm to it. It's not like the charm was totally lost on me, but the things that I think moved people, like, it didn't, I feel like they were pulling on stuff that I just didn't have. I'm like, I don't feel anything for this ghost, like how y'all be feeling for this ghost. It's just a ghost. I'm just walking through, like, random things are occurring. Versus, like, I also really like the cast of characters. I think, like, that also helps. You sort of have a more community-based moment where you're sort of interacting with these different people, and they're interacting with each other, and you're kind of seeing it all play out. Like, there's kind of a more initial, I think, in being initiated into Deltarune for me is easier because they immediately give me more intriguing gameplay and a more diverse cast of characters to initially like be with, versus Undertale is very much like this singular hero story where you do meet really iconic characters along the way, but they kind of play a different role than here, where it's a much more like a party system.
Got you. So, okay, I'm about to say something that might trigger you, not intentionally. So before that, I'm going to meet you in the middle of some common ground. I saw the episode of P.S. I Love You where you were standing up for Metal Gear Solid 3. I saw that and was like, I rock with her, man. I rock with her. I'm tired of people disrespecting Metal Gear Solid 3. So for those who don't know, Andy, ex-Game Informer, you know, editor-in-chief, Andy McNamara, he thinks Metal Gear Solid 3 is one of the worst games ever. And I'm like, I don't care who you are, sir. You may be Goliath to my David, but I will defend you. And so I don't know what it is with these top game people hating on Metal Gear Solid 3, but they need to stop it because that game is immaculate. And whoever thinks Peace Walker is better than any numbered Metal Gear, you can exit the conversation. Anyway, with that said, and my reason for not liking it, you may think is stupid. So I remember everyone talking about Chicory, and I'm gonna give that to you because I didn't see anyone talking about it until you talked about it first, and then I saw like the wave of everyone talking about it, like, oh, best game ever. And I could not stand Chicory, and I'm about to tell you why. Like, I could not finish it. And I don't have OCD, but I feel like if I finished that game, I would have. I was the kid who, whenever you colored outside the lines, had a fit. I'm like, what are you doing? There's the line. The color goes inside of it. And Chicory brought up that PTSD of that. And I was like, I can't do this. Like, I can't. I want to just click inside it and the color goes in there and it stays there and I can have nice separation. I was like, I can't.
Well, how far did you get into it?
I don't know. I'm gonna say maybe about an hour worth of gameplay.
Okay. Well, the only reason I mentioned that is because in the painting is definitely a contentious part of, also too, you know, you mentioned, I think it is fun to like where we hear about games from and stuff. I'm very glad that I could be like, even if you didn't end up liking it, the Chicory beacon. I personally, Chicory had been on my radar since I heard about it, especially like with, I always mispronounce, is it Leanna Rain? I never remember how to pronounce that person's name, but the Celeste composer, great composer. Like hearing all the different people involved, I was like, okay, I'm super excited. It looks cute. But Natalie Flores also had like a really glowing review of the game, and that's one of the people where I was like, okay, Natalie thinks this game is fire over at Fanbyte. So I'm like, okay, now I'm really excited. Like I was already gonna play it, but now I feel like, okay, there's got to be something special here if Natalie is latching onto it. As far as the coloring, definitely a point of contention for a lot of people. Some folks are like, look, I don't want to color, and that's like the main gameplay mechanic. So, I mean, what are we going to do? But I will say, as far as filling in the stuff, you get different brushes. Like, what kind of brushes did you... Because there's a paint bucket brush where it automatically fills into the line and fills in everything perfectly. And there's also, like, angled brushes with, like, where you can do straight lines and stuff if, like, you want the puzzle to look really nice. Like, there are tools to make it both easier to color and cleaner to color.
Okay, maybe I need to go back. Maybe I was just, I will admit, there are some games I will never knock it gets good eventually. I'm not saying maybe I just didn't give it its fair shake, but I am the person, if someone tells me, if I gripe about a game, they're like, keep going, you get there. I'm like, okay, that's fair. If someone can give me that good enough nod that it will be okay, I'm cool with that. And I know earlier I say, I'm all about artistic value, but similar to you with Undertale, one game that I will always give like a 3 out of 10 to, because I just don't see it. I played it, I got to the end, but it gave me such a headache and made me stressed out half time. Is The Witness. I don't see the 10 out of 10. I don't. I played the puzzles. I mean, some of them did give me like that super high of, dear God, I figured this out, because I'm like, I'm not looking up a guide. That was my gamer pride. I was like, this is a puzzle game, true and true. I just want to figure it out. I want to get that sense of discovery that everyone keeps talking about. And I did it, and I'm like, I don't see it. I don't.
I still have to finish The Witness, so I don't really have any, like, I don't have too many critical comments on The Witness, whether they be positive or negative, but I played only a little bit of it. I tried playing it on my phone, which I feel like was mistake number one. And like, I was sort of in a space where like, there are a lot of people in my life that I know that love The Witness. The Witness is probably one of my boyfriend's favorite games of all time, if not maybe his favorite game of all time. He loves it. I have a bunch of other friends that love it. And I remember starting it up and being like, okay, well, I don't really know. It's sort of like, if you haven't played it, you kind of start off in a very, almost like an open world puzzle game. And I'm like, I don't really know where I need to go. And they're like, oh, just like go up to something. And then you'll see that it has some markings, and like, you got to like learn the language of the game. And a lot of people compliment The Witness as like being able to teach you the language that it uses in order to construct its puzzles, which like maybe it does. I just didn't. It is very open. I feel like it is very challenging in its puzzles, which isn't bad. It's a puzzle game, and I think you do need interesting puzzles to be a good puzzle game. But I feel like there is a split from what I've seen of like, there's people that are like, all right, it's fine, like they're really well constructed puzzles, but like whatever. And then people that are like really into being cerebral. I feel like if you're a very like cerebral person, you like it a lot more. Like I always felt like having, worked at the IGN office, there was like a little bit of a split on like editorial side versus like the engineers. Like I remember The Witness is like, oh, the engineers fucking love this game because they're like smart as shit and can see all the different pathways and stuff. But I'm like, look, man, like I got a Bachelor of Arts. Like I don't got a Bachelor of Science. Like I don't know if this is going to be it for me. I would like to go and try it though. It's super acclaimed. It's like a really popular like PlayStation game in the PlayStation audience, but yeah, I could see how. I feel like 3 out of 10 might be. That's kind of shocking, but like I could see why that might not hit the same for certain people. I do think that's a little bit of a, what do you gravitate towards, and how much do you care about being moved by like the construction of a mechanic versus how it feels to actually play it.
Yeah, and the reason I say it's that low for me, okay, you mentioned Celeste, so I assume you played and beat Celeste.
Yeah.
Okay, Celeste is wonderful. We can give it all the accolades. It's hard. It's super hard, super challenging. You wear your death count like a badge of honor. But I feel like Celeste, you're climbing the metaphorical mountain and the literal mountain at the same time. And I feel like Celeste, like, okay, once you get places and once you finally get there, you're like, I'm here. It's like, it's what I've been working on. It's like that feeling of accomplishment, success. You went on this journey with Madeline.
Sure.
Yeah. Celeste's naming the mountain people. So, you went on this journey with her. You had the cool homie with you the whole time, yada, yada, yada. Where I feel as The Witness is like, it might as well been, to me, the witness might as well been like a series of Sudoku puzzles. Like, yeah, it's fun if you like doing Sudoku puzzles, but like once like I get the story, I'm exploring the island or whatever, you know, and I finally get there, you know, wherever there is, not to spoil anything for anyone, I'm just like, okay, so I racked my brain for this. So, I felt betrayed in the sense that I think for me, out of like just every puzzle just lined up or just in different areas and just be like, yeah, you're just doing puzzles. Because from a game standpoint, once I integrate, you know, the story that is being told and the secrets to be found out, like I beat the game, like not 100%, but to, you know, the end point. And I was like, all right, I need to go to the internet. I need to look up, maybe there's like secret puzzles. There's parts I need to keep playing. And I was just like, oh no, this is it. This is, I don't know. It more than I thought about, the angrier I got, because I'm just like, bro, 10 out of 10. If y'all were like 7, 8, 9, but now people were just like a must play. No, fam. We all need to have a round table about the witness. I digress. But I mean, you know, to each their own. If you love it, I'm not hating on you. Please don't at me about it. I mean, we'll have a talk. I'll never not have a discussion with somebody, but yeah. So I'm with you on that. Whenever you finish it, please let me know what you think. Maybe since you're not rocking with it, you'll give me something I didn't see.
I'm excited to finally give it a go. I do love puzzle games. I am a little bit apprehensive about it because I do hear about how difficult it is, and I'm just like, I just don't. And kind of like you said, like I'm very pro using guides. Like, do whatever you want, especially if you're just playing for fun. Like, you know, at least like since I play for more conversation and work reasons, like there's more incentive for me to play on a different sort of level than other people are. Not to be like, oh, it's like better, but you know, things like, okay, maybe if I'm gonna do this for content, I'm gonna maybe like read notes that I otherwise would skip, or you know, just like it's a different experience, because to me, I'm playing to inform myself in order to speak to other people who maybe like want to figure out if they should play or not, or if they want to play. So for me, that part of that work is doing like work elements of it. But I do think with a puzzle game, a guide can sometimes be, it is that stress of like, well, am I removing what the experience of this is, versus like in most other games, it's like, okay, there might be a puzzle in it, or you're not sure where to go. And that's kind of like more utilitarian, versus like, well, if I just look at this, what's left for the game? So it's like, okay, you want to try to, like, at least for me, I personally do try to minimize my use of guides when it is a puzzle game, because now I'm like, well, now there's like nothing left to do because that was the whole point. So I am a little bit nervous about how hard it might end up being, but I don't know. I'll give it a go. We'll see how it goes.
All right. I appreciate that. Let me know. So what we're going to talk about next is Nickelodeon All-Stars, which I must admit is a Smash clone. And it looked like it was going to be like, you know, all your other Smash clones, like, you know, your Brawlhalla's, your PlayStation All-Stars. Nothing against those games, but you know, they are what they are. They're fun to be had. But you know, Nickelodeon All-Stars, especially with these new developer videos they've been releasing, seems to be taking itself extremely serious, which I'm hella surprised at, because it's a game based off Nickelodeon characters, which is, let's be real, they're easy cash grab. There's countless SpongeBob games, and I think maybe one is passable, and that's being very lenient. But this is looking to be, people, ever since Melee came out, and Janet, I know, how old are you, Janet? Or what, around how old are you?
I think, I want to say I'm 27. I think that's right.
Okay, so you remember the heyday of Melee then?
Yeah, that was like one of my favorite games of all time, even though, shockingly, I did find out recently that I'm not good at that game at all. Despite spending literally hundreds, it is 27, I did the math, hundreds of hours. It's like probably one of the most played games of my life, like Melee on the GameCube. It would be me and my brother, and we would do 64-man Melee tournaments, just the two of us. We tried doing that like 2 years ago, and we realized it's like a 4 to 6 hour excursion. I don't know how we had the endurance to do that as kids, but we would do that regularly. So I played like a lot of it. That's still my favorite of the Smash games.
Oh, you were definitely not alone. You know, most people say that Smash doesn't get better than that. Brawl gets a bad number because it kind of did suck a little bit and it was following Melee. But you know, now we're Smash for Wii U. Smash
Ultimate.
Yeah, and then you get Smash Ultimate, which, you know, brings it all back. We're good now. But so, you know, a lot of people agree with that. And, you know, fun fact, I also thought I was good at Melee and then found out I wasn't. And then it made me get good at Smash. And now I'm like, I can go to Evo and make it past round 1 and then like lose horribly. You know, that's me. You know,
that's pretty good. That's better than most people. Like, I can't really do much at all. I realized I was only like evenly matched with my brother, but that's the only person I was playing with. So,
you know, back in the day, it's interesting because I guess kids nowadays, take that how you will people. It's like back in our day, it's like you got if you got 3 new games in 1 year, you were balling. Like you were on the easy street. Your parents had it made, you had it made. You know, we lived in the days where you rented most games, probably never beat them, and actually owned probably 1 to 2 new games every year. So yeah, you know, we had time to be like, yeah, now it's like, oh boy, I got 8 games all out right now. Dear God, help me.
For sure.
But so, and ever since Melee came out, you know, people have copied Smash and they've been good, but I don't know, based off these, it seems like Nickelodeon, or I don't know who's making the game, shame on me, they really are taking this serious. And I find that surprising because if this game hits, like I think it may possibly hit, because I don't think it needs to be good as Melee, but if it's in the ballpark, we could have a new fighting game contender in like the last place I would expect it. And I love to see it, honestly.
Yeah, I feel like the developers it's like a team, it seems. Brawl, not Brawl, well, All-Star Brawl, the name of the game. Ludosity, Fair Play Labs, and Ludosity AB. Not sure offhand like what other projects they worked on. It's published by Game Mill Entertainment. Yeah, I mean, I would actually argue, for me, I interpret like all of the content they're pumping out not to be necessarily, well, here's the thing. No one tries to make a bad game. Like, I genuinely believe that, like, yeah, people go out there and they do their best, and this is what they make. And sometimes it's amazing, and sometimes it kind of sucks. And, you know, I don't think anyone's, like, been working on it. Sure, there's maybe, like, the exceptions of, like, literal, like, shovelware type, like those mobile games we get ads for, that's, like, pull the plier to save the mom from the gel. Okay, sure. Maybe they're probably just making that just to make the money. Or like, you know, I've known people that have worked on, like licensed casino game type stuff where they're just kind of making like these light animations. And like, admittedly, I don't know how much of their developmental passion went into that. So I will say there are, you know, a few exceptions to this, but on the whole, I think everyone tries to make a good game. And I feel like the people at, you know, Ludosity, Fair Play, Ludosity AB, I think they're trying to make a good game with this IP. So that to say, I don't think this game will be good. And I don't think necessarily all the content means that they really are just so confident in the product. I think they know that it's a good marketable product because it has the Nickelodeon branding. I think they're pumping out content to keep getting coverage, which is smart because that's what you should do for any game that you're making. You want to put content out there and get stuff that, you know, the big outlets are going to want to write about. And I think big outlets are writing about it because people will click on it, because people are curious, because people like Nickelodeon. So I think it's a cycle of, like, you know, outlets for the most part pick their coverage based on what will be interesting to their audience and fit their ethos. You know, it's like, okay, well, why will this audience care about it? What's our new angle? How are we going to present it? You know, et cetera, et cetera. So like with something like this, it's like, okay, there's the nostalgia angle and they know that. So they'll keep pumping out who this is, or it's interesting or amusing. We've seen this a lot with the marketing of Super Monkey Ball. I don't think Super Monkey Ball gonna be fire like that, but they're so smart because they're adding all these characters in. And like I've talked about it on my show, Game Houses Weekly, because it's interesting and curious to be like, oh, this person from Yakuza's in there. They put a console in the Monkey Ball ball. Like it's fun. People like reporting on it. People like reading it. I'm not above that either. And I think that's kind of what we're seeing in this marketing cycle. Just having, you know, I'm curious. I actually played Nickelodeon Kart Racers for review, and I'm wondering who made that and if it's the same team or the same publisher. So I'm kind of trying to look that up on the side. But yeah, what's your take on what we have going on and what we could sort of expect? It is a different, the developers are different, but so for Kart Racers, it was developed by Game Mill Entertainment among like 3 other developers. Here, Game Mill is publishing. So not sure what that means for like similarities or lack thereof, but I will say Nickelodeon Kart Racers, not a good game, but better than you think it would be for it being kind of what it is, you know?
Okay. So here's a tale of 2 stories again for me. So one, I think, again, to elaborate what you're saying on the marketing is it's actually hella genius because not only are they pumping out this content, but they're highly tuned in to what the community wants, in the sense that they're like, look, you can wave dash in this game, and like have a video specifically showcasing wave dashing. And I'm like, oh, that's cool, because, you know, people who love Melee, that's one of the number one things that they hate wasn't going forward. You know, people argue, well, it was broken, or it was an unintended mechanic, yada, 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 so on and so forth. But someone is aware that wave dashing they're like, if we're going to be a Smash clone, we need to be a Smash clone completely. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, that's cool, because Brawlhalla, well, I don't think Brawlhalla was just it's just fun, but like PlayStation All-Stars and things that are similar to that, you know, they wanted to be a Smash clone, but still carve their own lane and, you know, have their own rules and mechanics, so to speak. But this is like, no, this is Smash, but with a Nickelodeon face, and they're not shying away from that. And then that's the thing that gives me hope that maybe, you know, of course, clearly at the end of the day, let's be real, people want to make money. The goal of every company is to make money, because if you don't make money, you don't keep going, blah, 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 blah. So ignoring that, obviously make money. It's like, okay, you seem to have like, think of like, you know, Sakurai, or like when Street Fighter comes up, like, here's the character, here's the moveset, you know, they're doing that. And I'm like, that's ingenious, and it makes me believe. I honestly, if I'm being real, I'm like, this game's going to be hot garbage. Shout out to all the people who made it. but then I'm like, okay, let's be real. This game is probably going to come out, because I don't see any major fighting game people or somebody from, you know, who has that background working on this game. And if you don't have those kind of people, then there's only so much you can do. You know, you need somebody with the area of expertise. Like, me and you could make a Blaze Blue game. Yeah, we could maybe get the artists, and we could get them to jump and kick, but that's about it. So, but yeah. But I guess I want to pretend. Let's me and you both pretend this game is fire. It is literally the reincarnation of Melee. What does that mean for the gaming world? Could you imagine watching this at EVO Finals? Like SpongeBob versus Sandy Cheeks.
Yeah, that'd be really weird. That'd be that'd be a fun world to live in. I don't think it's the world we're gonna live in, but yeah, I mean, it's obviously, yeah, like a player entering the space, it's such a competitive market to get these kind of games off the ground. And to your point, you really do need to understand like how to get get a certain feel down, and like be very intentional about it. I mean, yeah, people always talk about what a genius Sakurai is, and even though, yeah, maybe that's laying it on a little thick, but also like, I mean, he's done some really incredible things. So yeah, I hesitate to see that world, but it would be really funny if that happened.
Oh yeah, I want it to happen for the obvious gag reasons, but you know, I think it'd be cool. It would be cool to see someone finally find the success of Smash, and then I'm just thinking about, okay, let's say it's legit successful, like, you know, they're going to make sequels, or, you know, keep going with it. Then you have all these, you know, you have like the world of Rugrats, the world of Avatar, all these, you know, the Nickelodeon video game universe characters are now, you know, what Smash is to Nintendo and gaming as a whole. You have this for Nintendo, and then like now you have Cartoon Network properties entering the fray. Like, how insane would that be? And I got to say this, people, we're all going to get the game at some point, maybe not buy it, however we play it. And we're going to live Nickelodeon fantasies. And my Nickelodeon fantasy is I want to beat the brakes out of Eliza Thornberry. Like,
that's a good one.
Yeah, if she's not in the game, I'm going to be disappointed. I might not even play it. You're thinking of that. Why Eliza Thornberry? Because she, I don't know if this was intentional, but she is like the personification of like colonization, but like with the animal world. Every problem in that show as a result of her messing everything up. It's like, here's an ecosystem that's thriving, beautiful. Yeah, I'm Eliza Thornberry. I'm a little white girl that clearly knows what's best for y'all. Here's what I'm going to do. And then the next 20 so minutes is them just fixing the problem she created. And as a little kid, I'll be like, girl, just talk to the birds. They didn't ask you for your help. Leave them alone. Stop messing up the ecosystem. And my thing is, it's just like, she never grows as a character. Yes, it's a kid show, people, but I don't care. Because Powerpuff Girls didn't have this problem. They grew as characters. They had arcs. The movie was wonderful. What was the Wild Thornberry movie about? Her messing up the world and all. But anyway, that's what I want to do. Is there one you want to beat from Nickelodeon Universe? Just like beat Senseless with a pan?
Uh, from the Nickelodeon universe, I guess it'd be fun to beat up Plankton since he's like inherently evil and he's really small. So I feel like, the weight balance there is clearly pretty one-sided. But as far as like, there's been like 20 fighters, at least 20 fighters confirmed. I'm kind of looking at Dextero's reporting. But I think from the characters listed, I guess beating up Helga would be cool because she's like she's like pretty problematic. She's a creep. She's like a stalker, but she's also like constantly like talking smack all the time. Like, I don't know. There's really much redeeming about Helga, really. Like, other than that one episode where like she had her sort of feminist moment at like the slumber party being like, why are we doing all this? Like, let's just, other than that, like she really doesn't have many redeeming characters and she's kind of a mean friend. As far as characters to be, I mean, Danny Phantom's really cool. I think Cat Dog would be fun because I imagine that'll be like a stretchy character. But there's also been a lot of games that I've played recently that have had like stretchy dog characters. Like I played Fogs, which is I think still on Game Pass, where you play as like the two ends of the dog and it's like a little puzzle wonky physics thing. And then I played oh man, what is it called? It's like a platformer, Fling Together or Fling It or so. I'm trying to think of what the name of this game was. Fling Game Platformer. I'm like frantically Googling on the side. Yeah, but I got it. Fling to the Finish. That was the name of the game, where you're also like, you're not a dog, but you're like connected through stretchy rope. So I feel like that would be kind of a fun mechanic. But yeah, I mean, the thing I would love is for someone to come in and do this well-ish. Like I don't think there's a world that exists. If we could Doctor Strange look at all the possibilities, I don't think Doctor Strange would see a world where this is hitting the Evo stage. But what I would like is if it could just be as good as like, Brawlhalla, or as good as, is Brawlhalla the one? There was a couple different Switch clones or Smash clones that kind of hit the Switch. I'm trying to think of, there's Brawlhalla, but there's also another one that I had for a while, like something around that level where it's not changing the world, but it's serviceable. I think one beef I have with a lot of these like IP cash grabs, for lack of a nicer term, is like the feel is just a little bit off. And like with Nickelodeon Kart Racers, again, not the same developer, same publisher involved. It had a lot of potential with like the IP integration, but like it just didn't feel right. So it's like, well, I mean, the whole point is that I'm driving in the car. Like that needs to feel all right. And I think, you bringing back like how many SpongeBob games are actually good. I played a little bit of SpongeBob Rehydrated because my boyfriend bought it and was like, oh, it has multiplayer. Like, let's check it out. It'll be fun. And like in my head, I'm like, bro, this is going to be real bad. It's like not even going to be like, it's going to be really bad. And it was. And it's just like, man, like this is just it's just not good. Like it really, I can't even look past it. Like it just feels bad. So if they could just get it to feel decent, I think that would be a huge win. I'm not sure the likelihood of that, but here's hoping.
I always found it weird because back in the day when we had movie IP games, which were like the cash grab games, a movie comes out, it gets a game. A movie comes out, it gets a game. And those were usually like cut and paste of like a popular game at the time, but cut and paste in a way where it's just bad. Like not even like, oh, this is, you have those games that are kind of like bad, but they're kind of just fun and stupid. And as long as you're enjoying yourself, you're having a good time. But like to your point, like no, they just feel wrong. Like you jump and like the weight of the character doesn't feel right. The spacing is always off. You're too floaty. You're not floaty enough. All this weird like, damn. I really respect good games now and people who put the time and effort, because it's something as simple as jumping and then falling down can just be wrong. And
yeah, absolutely.
I'm going to disagree. I assume Doctor Strange could find at least one universe where this maybe hits the Evo stage. The holds up the one finger type thing. But if I was a betting man, which I am sometimes, clearly I'm not going to put any money on this. And this has nothing to do with gaming at all. But recently, at Teen Nick at Night, I don't know. They have a 90s Nick segment on one of the extended Nickelodeon channels, and I watch it late at night because 90s kid, shows Rugrats, Rocket Power, the whole nine. And they've recently had they have a 2 hour, 1 hour block of Hey Arnold, so I just kind of been rewatching it ad nauseum, and I'm just like, bro, someone in the writer room should have stopped pulled it back on Helga G. Pataki. She was a stalker. She like took this fool's used gum, chew it, had like a literal shrine to him that she will make sacrifices to. I'm not kidding, people. Go back and watch it. She wasn't like, doing, it wasn't like killing anything, but she brought offerings into it and stuff. And I'm just like, bro, this is kind of scary. Like, I didn't see it as a child, but I feel like this could have negatively, like, I imagine if someone was crushing on somebody hard and was maybe around that age. They're in the 4th grade, but I refuse to believe that because they're, like, going to, like, movies at 10 o'clock and, like, constantly without parental supervision, but whatever. But I'm just like, yo, bro, like, Helga has some issues, like...
Yeah, it was too much. It wouldn't, I will say it wouldn't have come out now. Yeah. I feel like now, like, that character would have been dialed down by like a good amount. Yeah, choices were made. Oh yeah. Great show though. Yeah. And the music's amazing. Oh my gosh. Like, there's like occasionally there's these different like meme sort of trends or like, oh, tell me, XYZ or whatever, like on Twitter or on social media. Like, and one I saw either on Twitter or on TikTok was like, what's a game from like or a song from a fictional universe that you love, or like things like that. And like Hey Arnold has so many of them, like Dino Spumoni, like, oh man, left my heart on pieces on the floor. So like, it's so good.
That's pretty good. I'm not gonna try to sing because I actually have a horrible singing voice, but Dino Spumoni's the man. Also, because I watched this episode the other day, it's when they're gonna knock over the whatever theater. And like Ernie's like, yeah, it's gonna be my 1000th knockdown, Arnold. I want you to be there because you're like my son guy. He's like, yeah. And then ultimately, everyone agrees to not knock it down because that's like where Dino Spumoni got his start. And everyone's like, oh yeah, Dino Spumoni, we got. I'm like, how did y'all not know this though? Like everybody.
That's true too. Yeah. Well, you know what? I think it was kind of one of those like hidden, like at least the angle from the episode, if I remember correctly, it was sort of like a hidden piece of history, like. You say like how could people not know this, but like I forgot. I might be misnaming what Mario game it was. So people feel free to correct and chime in with the real answer. But like the first Mario game, like people don't know what day that came out. Like we don't know the actual date. We have a really close approximation. We can get within the month, but there's like multiple sources that give different dates on like when that game came out, like whatever old Mario game. So stuff like that, I think I can see how something could be lost to history. Especially if it's like before his career, because was it like the first place he performed, right?
It was the first place he performed I think they say where he got his start, and I might have mistook that as like he performed here a lot. I mean, it could have, for the sake of this to make sense to me, he performed there once and never again.
Yeah, well, it might have been like the equivalent of like when Taylor Swift's career started and she was like performing in these bars and stuff, and it could be something like that, where it's like very low level, like early bits of fame. So I can see you're right in a sense. It depends on how known this fact was, and I'm pretty sure Arnold wasn't like doing extreme historian level research, but yeah, there are things that get lost to time. So I guess that was thank God he was there with the research, with the facts, he brought the receipts. And everyone's like, never mind. It's now a landmark or something. I don't know.
Yeah. Shout outs to Arnold's grandma. Like, I wish I had a grandma like that. I love my grandmas. Grandmas, I know y'all don't listen, but in case y'all do, love y'all. But I'm just like, man, she was such a real one. Like,
and she was down.
Oh, yeah. And, speaking of things that can never get made today, which is a weird thing to say, because I feel like we live in a day where, like, games are so, accepting and they can push the envelope in so many ways. But like, it's weird because 12 Minutes came out and people dragged it. I'm not saying it didn't deserve to be dragged, but it got dragged. Like, it was like 1 inch away from curve stomp levels. But I'm also like, we lived in the world where Conker's Bad Fur Day came out and people like to this day claim you should play it if you never played it. So I'm always like, we live in an interesting time in what's acceptable in games.
Well, I think, there's a lot going on with 12 Minutes. I feel like the shock factor of like some of the elements of where the story goes, having beaten it but not wanting to spoil it for anybody, like a lot of people point to that as like one of their big gripes, or when they drag it, they bring that up. And I think that's totally fair because I agree. But I'm like, I hated the game long before I got to the end of it. Like, it wasn't, you know, like, it had other problems. Now, I will say, as far as 12 minutes, there are people that really like it. Like, there are outlets that reviewed it really highly. So, and I kind of can see why people would like it, because I think it had some really great ideas. I just think ultimately the way those ideas were executed failed on a few different levels. But I can kind of see, like, to me, it's one of those great examples of, like, a game. Well, I feel like I actually probably would rate it really low. I probably would say it was just straight up bad, but I can see
where
the good is in
10?
there. Yeah, I can see where the good is in there. But versus, you know, what was the other example you gave? 12. Oh, Conker's Bad Fur Day. Conker's Bad Fur Day. I do think that the toilet humor has kind of worn thin, though at the same time, there are people that think Borderlands is like a funny game still, and I feel like that's in the same. Yeah, better writing, honestly, and, you know, more complex constructions.
I hear you.
Pulling on a lot of the same stuff. Yeah, like I think Conker's Bad Fur Day. I haven't played it in a long time. I do think one of the things that's weird about recommending old stuff is a lot of times those recommendations come off of memory, and our memory is faulty just as human beings. Like, we don't have great memory. Like, it's pretty flawed. So, like, I remember playing Conkers or, you know, a bunch of other older games and, like, loving them. But I think going back, I sometimes do end up walking away with, like, a different perspective. Even something like Diddy Kong Racing, I'm like, oh, that was a great game. And I went back to play it, and I'm like, this doesn't control well. It's very slow. I mean, I still have a lot of the ideas of it. I think if you remake it and stuff, like, I'd be down. But I'm like, yeah, actually, this wasn't good. Or this isn't good now, or whatever. I don't have the same recommendation or the same feeling. That's why sometimes it's better just not even to go back, because, like, the worst case scenario is that you realize actually you don't like this thing, at least not anymore. So yeah, it's painful.
Yeah, I get you 100%. I'm with you on 12 minutes. I said that. I got some pushback, but I stood firmly. I was like, bro, I was not enjoying my time with 12 minutes. That when the shocking truth came out, which it didn't leave me appalled. It left me where, like, why? Like, okay, what?
And just the way it was set up too, like, the reveal of it was just so, like, it's just cheap. Like, I don't know. It's just like, oh, and then what if you looked on, you know, it was like the equivalent of, like, actually you were drinking this coffee and check the bottom of the mug and it says the killer. It's like that level of reveal, you know, for those who didn't play it. And it just kind of felt like, all right, and, like, okay. And then it just kind of, yeah, it was wild. Yeah. It was a wild journey.
Yeah, and we're about to end the show, people. I just gotta say this real quick because me and you are vibing right now. It's okay. So this opinion is not popular, and I get why, but I'm curious to hear your opinion on it real quick. Okay, you can, and I say can because I didn't know you could until, like, I looked up other routes. I wasn't gonna play it. You can do some despicable things in 12 minutes. And I'm not saying you shouldn't be appalled. What is appalling to you is fair and accurate all the time. You know what I'm saying? We are all different people with different experiences. And I get that, and I'm for that. But the thing I didn't like about when people were dragging about 12 minutes was like, hold on here. Don't act like we don't do horrible things in games all the time. Like, for example, in The Last of Us Part 2, you stab a pregnant woman to death. Regardless if you know you didn't know, you did it. And people will praise that game to the end of time. So I'm like, I just use that as an example for a game that people generally like altogether. I mean, you can think of any God of War game because people were acting like in 12 minutes, which I will come to his defense in this instance that, oh, this was the first time you ever done something remotely horrible in the game. I'm like, okay, hold on, people. Let's be real here. Let's give it a fair shake across gaming in general. And I just want to know what your opinion on that was.
Yeah, I mean, I think the only layer of complexity I think gets added to this is there are a lot of, you know, verticals of criticism that look at and question brutality against women specifically. And I think even the instance that you brought up with, like, The Last of Us 2, I think that's worth thinking about at least. Like, the idea of, like, how is violence against women depicted? How often is it leaned on? Because I do think we see it a little bit more, like, in a weird way, more than men, or it's more played up than men. I even know people that would talk about, like, isn't it kind of weird how in, like, Tomb Raider, like, why is Lara Croft's death so, like, graphic versus, like, you know, an Uncharted or any other similar.
That's a good one. It did make my stomach kind of
And you know, and there's definitely, like, so I encourage people to look up, like, what do they call it? It's kind of like it's not voyeuristic, there's a word for it, but like just kind of how violence against kind of like almost like torture porn almost kind of situations. Like that's a big criticism of like a lot of like David Cage's games from Quantic Dream, where again, I think, you know, using like Detroit Become Human as a specific example, a game that I think has a lot of overarching flaws in how it approaches story and the idea of like how it deals with race or doesn't deal with race, et cetera, et cetera. But I think pulling that to the side for a second and just looking at like the narrative construction, I think there are a lot of great things about that game and how deep and layered it is. But one thing is like, oh, well, it just shows some abuse against women, which maybe in isolation could be fine. But when you kind of look at it in the conversation of other David Cage games, where it's like, it's kind of weird how David Cage is always showing these really gruesome scenes against, and, you know, I think it's worth questioning that. So that's the extent that I'll like, I guess, give in on people that are like, this seems kind of gross to me. I think that layer of it is where I see the most of the validity coming from, because I do think that's a trend that we see in this industry a lot. And I think it's one worth thinking about. And again, it's not that you're not allowed to show violence against women, but I think sometimes when it's done, it's kind of like, hey, have you noticed that it's always like really like this specific way or like really graphic? And then when you think of like, what roles do women play in stories in general, and maybe in that specific game, like what that, you know, what that means and whether or not that's like the right way to go about it. That being said, I didn't have a problem with it personally. I don't know if we want to say what it is or not, but like, I personally was wondering as a player, can I do this? And then I could, and I was like, cool. Like, I know it sounds horrible. Like, I'm not saying that I'm like, oh yeah, I definitely want to like, you know, hurt other people or hurt women specifically or hurt, you know, these relationships. But for me, that was just like an example where you like could think of an idea and you were able to implement it, which I think ultimately is a strength in a game like that. One thing I will say, though, is worth critiquing is there are a lot of times in that game in 12 minutes where you'll get an item and you're like, surely I can use this to do this. Or surely when I interact with, you know, if I want to take a picture of the fridge, I don't have to open the fridge first, or like, you know, other weird things. There's a lot of instances where objects don't let you do certain things with them, or you're not able to solve something the way you think you could solve it. So I do think for like an instance where you are allowed to commit violence against like a woman, but you can't do all these other things, I think that's maybe worth critiquing, where it's like, oh, sure, I can't, you know, pour the water out in the sink, but I can like stab so-and-so or something like that. Again, those are kind of just fluff examples just to kind of pull them out of thin air. But I think that's maybe the extent that I would be grossed out by it if I was. I personally wasn't, but I think that element of it is worth critiquing. Like, I can do that, but I can't do these other things. Seems kind of weird. Seems like maybe you left it in there to be shocking and not for just like, wow, look at all the things I can do. I can do anything I think of. What an innovative, like, looping thing. I think that falls apart when you look at all the things you can't do in that game, where it's like, okay, you left this one in, though. That seems kind of weird.
Okay. You know, I thank you for that perspective, because you said some things I didn't consider, you know, all of its over-encompassing thing. And I think you're right. There's something to think about, because I guess my stance was, and a little some of the ignorance on my part was just like, I don't like to be like, I'm going to call this thing out because I hate it, but not call out the other things because I kind of like it. So, but, you know, I like how you said, you know, how we should look at, you know, encompassing overall, because, you know, I'm not a woman, clearly. So clearly when you brought those things, I was like, you make good points, because I've always thought, you know, specifically about your Lara Croft example, I was like, why are they so brutal? Like, and I'm thinking like, oh, well, I mean, it's because, you know, it's the reboot game. But then you brought up like Nathan Drake never dies like that. I'm like, that is an excellent point. So yeah, that's something worth thinking about. Sally, this is the end of the show. You know, if I have you on later, we can definitely dive into it and break that down. And I'm sorry, people. I know we got a little real at the end, but hey, games are real, gritty, like this life. The block is hot, the streets are cold. Never forget that, people. But Janet, I want to thank you so very much for joining this week. I greatly appreciate you and your time. And real quick, where can people find you, keep up with you, you know, all that good stuff?
Yeah, thanks. I had a lot of fun being on the show. You can follow me across the internet under the handle Game Onysus. That's Game ONYSUS. So that's, you know, Twitter, TikTok, Twitch, my YouTube. I have a site, GameOnysus.com. It's sort of like a hub thing if you maybe aren't on social media as much but want to catch the content and all that. But yeah, that's sort of a good pillar to check out all my other content. Like I said, I'm on Patreon if you're looking for ways to support. On my site, GameOnysus.com, I also have a page that's like how to support that breaks down both financial and free ways to support, because I know not everyone who's a fan of my work can necessarily like give me money in any way, which is also fine because there's a lot of other ways to check out my content and help push the brand and all that stuff. So appreciate y'all checking me out across those platforms on the internet.
That's what's up. That's what's up. And remember, people, please go and do that. And you can also support this show for free, but like, share, and subscribing. It's anywhere podcast is found now officially, because I think I've hit every app at this point, and I'm just not going to do it anymore. I don't care if you use like Podcast Beam, 20X. There's enough. There's enough. Go to YouTube, anywhere podcast is found. Like, share, subscribe. There's a Patreon, Full Circle Productions. Check that out. If you want to give some money, you can be like these cool people. Gabriel Cleveland, Ryan Frazier, Bake Rice, Rachel Coleman, Gabriel Garcia. They're in that shout-out tier. So go there and you get your shout-outs. But like I said, you can listen for free 99. Don't matter to me, but I just want to thank you for your time. Thanks for being here. And as always, have a great week and be blessed.